What's up, everybody? This is Greg with Delta Financial, and this is the Be the Difference podcast. This podcast is all about making you a better person in your life and in your business with coaching on sales, leadership, mindset, marketing, everything under the sun when it comes to being an entrepreneur. And we bring on guest speakers. Today, I have the honor and pleasure of welcoming Miss Meridith Alexander.
Well, hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it is my pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on board. I'm really excited for you to share your experience and your wisdom with the audience here. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, as you can tell from the rubber chickens in the back, there have been a lot of ups and downs and all arounds in the process. So
yeah, for definitely. Sure. And for the audience, for the people that don't know Meridith, let me go ahead and introduce her.
Sure.
In 2016, a boulder came plummeting off the side of a mountain. It brought with it something epic, a lesson in how to face impossibility, change, challenge, and the commitment to triumph no matter what. She likes to say that she's in the business of helping professionals and entrepreneurs and their teams come even more alive and achieve things that previously might have seemed impossible. Her signature Epic You methodology has helped hundreds of clients learn how to play the inner game to win. Clients typically come to her feeling stuck, like they have tried everything, and by simply making some important inner game and outer game shifts, they go on to completely transform their lives, secure promotions, launch new businesses, change careers, negotiate tens of thousands more in the salaries, and learn how to consistently show up as the most optimal version of themselves. Not your mama's coaching, motivational speaking experience. They revel in taking women on a journey that is both inspiring and safe, as well as empowering and sometimes even deliciously new and uncomfortable. They believe in laughter will always be an important part of the medicine / growing process. And they gently remind each other the true compassionate confidence is the ability to laugh at their stumbles, at our stumbles, and love ourselves without reservation. They challenge the old approach to keep people and women playing small, feeling unseen, unappreciated, and alone. They dare those people and women who have focused almost entirely on others for so long to be willing to finally see their own brilliance by going beyond the place where their beliefs stop them. They tread fearlessly beyond common expectations about what's possible by unapologetically sharing exhilarating examples of resilience and invincibility, and creating a nurturing environment and community for people and women to boldly explore a version of themselves and that they might not have previously been, or they might have previously been afraid to consistently own. Now is not the time to fear, change, or run from change. Now it is the time that we must dig deep and unleash the most epic version of ourselves, even if we're not sure if that version of ourselves even exists. Meridith.
Well, I have to acknowledge you for reading that whole thing. That was incredible. And by the way, I work with a heck of a lot of men as well, too. So first kudos, I was like, oh my gosh, he's going to read that whole thing. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I like it.
Well, cool. Absolutely. So shoot, what questions do you have for me?
Well, Meredith, I like with my audience, I like to start off from the beginning. Typically most business owner, entrepreneurs, coaches, like for you in your situation of chasing personal excellence and chasing your highest potential, typically there's some moment in time that's like a switch flips. It's sometimes we hit rock bottom. Sometimes it's just that conversation that, we didn't want to hear, but we needed to hear. But it's a pivotal moment that kind of changes everything for us. And it sends us down a new path, a new trajectory. And so let's start with that with you.
Yeah,
let's start all this.
I love it. And so it's really interesting. It was like there were two parts of my life, and one where I was deliberately thinking I was chasing the excellence. I went to prep school, I went to Georgetown, and I was like, go. I ended up being a single mom, lots of stumbles in the road where things didn't work out the way I thought that they should have worked out. And it felt like the more that I was chasing the more that I felt that I was failing. And so my sense of who I was, I just felt like I was completely losing it.
Mhm.
Even though, professionally, I was a serial entrepreneur. I'd launched businesses. On paper and to the outside world, I looked like I was just rocking it, right? And then all of a sudden on a Friday afternoon, literally almost 7 years ago to the day from when you and I are speaking here. So on February the 19th, 2016, I got a call at 3:15 in the afternoon. So literally we are almost seven years to the moment that my youngest daughter, who had just graduated from Yale and was on a fellowship in South America, had just randomly been crushed by a boulder. And her injuries were so extensive that the best that they could hope for was that they could keep her alive long enough for me to come and say my final goodbyes. So clearly, that's not what you're expecting on a Friday afternoon in the middle of your busy season
Yeah.
when you are an entrepreneur saying, go, 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 go. So I literally had to drop everything. And my other daughter came with me. My son stayed here. And hours later, after being turned away by American Airlines, thank you very much, we were on a flight from Miami to Bogota, and then from Bogota to Bucaramanga, and then another 4.5 hour drive to get to this tiny little hospital that ultimately we discovered my daughter had been taken to. What was just profound about this whole thing and life-changing for me was that I had to travel hours at 30,000 feet and ask myself some really powerful questions because, of course, at first, it was just this raging ocean of negative emotions. But as I flew over there, what really became clear to me that by far the worst of all the emotions was feeling powerless to help my daughter and feeling like this boulder was about to make me its second victim. So this was really when I realized that I had to get my power back, even if I didn't know if this epic version of myself even existed. I had to find it for my daughter. So this is where I leaned back into all these outer game things that I had studied, the marketing, the branding, all these things that were going to make me successful meant nothing. Ironically enough, it was the things that had helped me when I felt kicked to the curb, and they were all inner game things. So I realized that I may not be a control game, but thanks to all the craziness that I had endured at times in my life, I could play a mean inner game. So I basically said game on at that point and leaned into things like my language, um, and my focus, and really regulating that part of the imagination that either can go to the left and create fear or go to the right and create possibility. And so that became my driving force as I flew over there and headed to the hospital to see my daughter.
That had to have been such a tremendously powerful in both, the emotional standpoint, negative emotions, unknown, the fear of the unknown, and the struggle that you had to face just in that. I mean, I had to be the worst plane ride ever. Like,
Yeah, it really was. And in some ways, though, Greg, it ended up being the best plane ride ever because it's where not only I discovered who I wanted to be for my daughter,
yeah,
but I discovered who I wanted to define myself as for me going forward. I realized that I had spent decades of my life auditioning for the role of someone else's kind of hero this super figure, and I had lost myself in the process. And what this crazy boulder made me come face to face with was, who was I going to choose to be? Because what I really discovered was that this boulder, I like to say that it wasn't sent to destroy us. It was sent to destroy the things that we've been allowing to make us play small. And so I had to make a decision. Was I going to allow this boulder to send me catapulting into despair so that I completed the rest of my life defining myself as the mother of a child who'd been tragically killed by a boulder? Or regardless of what happened, was I going to take my power back and step forward as the mother of a child who in just 22 years had already made a powerful impact on this planet and done more than most of us do in 80? And so that's what I started stepping into. And as I committed to playing this inner game to win, it really created this shift within me that, you know, as crazy as it sounds, it just gave me armament and ammunition like I've been questing for all of my life and never realized until I came face to face with all the other stuff peeled away, that this came down to me and who was I going to choose to step into this moment being. And this, all this inner game stuff, it was either real or it wasn't. And if I was at all willing to believe that it was real, then I had to play it, and I had to play it 1,000%. And so that's what transpired and on that plane. So it was things like understanding there are 3 questions that I think that whenever we're up against any kind of conflict or challenge that we need to put front and center. And the first question in my mind is, what can I control? Clearly, I couldn't control the boulder. Clearly, I couldn't go in there as some sort of medical genius and heal my daughter. But what I could control was my inner game. So that was one. Second question is, what can my mind believe? So the trick was finding a way that my mind could authentically believe that the impossible was not only possible, but probable in our case. So this meant I couldn't just try to look on the bright side, because when we're trying to look on the bright side, where are we really focused? That big looming dark side, right? So that had to not even exist. So, and then the third question is, what am I assuming that's not necessarily true? And in this case, I was assuming that just because medical precedent said her skull is cracked open, her lungs are crushed, her spine is fractured, et cetera, all this other laundry list of injuries that she had, well, clearly she's not going to survive. Well, who says? So that's where it started, applying some of the tactics of the inner game, saying, okay, let's find one thing that my mind can believe. And the first thing was, has anyone ever accomplished something that everyone else said was impossible? Well, clearly that was laughable. I was on a plane, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago when that was impossible. So there I was. My mind could believe that. And so it was an easy step from there to go, has anyone ever seen a miracle ever throughout time in humanity? And again, that's laughable. We hear about these so-called miracles all the time. And the only reason we call them miracles is we just don't quite know how to fit them into our typical compartments. Sometimes they just bust through. And what's the common denominator? It's almost always the inner game. So by the time I got to that hospital, I was a force to be reckoned with. I mean, I'm sure some of the doctors and nurses and observers thought I was probably some crazy delusional mom because I arrived, kind of to be the leader of the team, but not in a, we're not fighting this thing because there is no thing, right? This is every, my mantra was kind of like, my daughter's going to be fine, whatever that new fine is going to be. We just have to figure out how to get her there. And so it wasn't creating an adversary. It was realizing that there was so much more out there than just what was going on in the moment, and that crazy, inexplicable things happen every day. So why not try to harness it? Does that make sense?
It does. It does. No, I love it. And it sounds very transformational.
It
Like,
was totally transformational. I mean, Greg, it was wild because, but I mean, I imagine that it would be the same thing, in a moment, any moment of great adversity when you're being tested to the core. All of the little superficial mosquito questions that just fly around us became suddenly irrelevant. It was, this is my moment. I've never lived this moment before. I don't care what happened in the past. The past does not define my current moment. So who am I going to show growing into? Who do I demand for myself, just for me? What is that epic version of myself? And is that epic version of myself simply someone who can now go forward and carry the legacy that my daughter started if she didn't make it? However, she did make it. And
that's
so,
that's what I was waiting.
yeah. So I mean, it was crazy, Greg. So it was like I found one thought that felt a little bit better, and then I found another thought. And before I knew it, I was not in despair anymore. It was hope. And then it was like, okay, I believe this could be possible, but belief still has a little bit of crack in it. And so I had to really keep going in this process until I got to the place that I really can only describe as this like profound sense of knowing, in the form of such expectation that I no longer felt that I had to fight. It was almost as if the game was rigged. And all I had to do was show up convinced of that, and that life would have to conform to my vision. So, little disclaimer.
That's so powerful, by the way. I feel like that mindset right there, that like that knowing, that belief, that energy
Yeah.
that you are putting out into the universe is probably the determining factor of what actually helped her to survive.
It's interesting. I mean, and I'm really, really careful to say, I do not want to imply that, my energy alone saved my daughter, right? Because there was a medical team that did incredibly medical magic on her. However, to your point, what I have discovered in myself and now with the clients that I work with, that when we can ignite, unleash, right, that sense of that epic version of themselves, and knowing that it's not in spite of all of their own boulders that they succeed. It's precisely thanks to these boulders that they have the capability of being turbocharged to really, really soar. And when we can know this and feel that there's a harmony rather than a conflict in this, it becomes epically, epically powerful. And we do tap into a version of ourselves that is capable of achieving things that previously seemed impossible. So for us, things that were medically impossible, miracles, whatever you want to call them, started happening like immediately. As soon as I got to the hospital, it was swelling that I mean, first of all, going back 2000 years, Hippocrates made an observation that tends to hold true today. And that is, if you can see the brain of the patient, they tend to not survive. Well, Sky, you most certainly could. And yet the swelling went down remarkably, so that in just 3 days, we were able to have her flown at sea level from Colombia to Miami. So she was admitted into Jackson Memorial there. Miracle after miracle after miracle. I mean, far more than I have time to share, just kept happening. And it would get to the point where these doctors, I mean, and these are like the Olympians of neurosurgery, and they would keep pulling me into the nurses' station saying, what you're seeing here, we have to show you. We go home, we talk to our families about this, because you are like the miracle family. And if we did not see this here, we would believe that there was something wrong with our technology, with a CAT scan machine, etc. So it really is incredible, because I think when you have that kind of mindset, you end up positively infecting the people who are around you. With that, you create a momentum that, because it's very focused, it's very deliberate, as opposed to just being on an autopilot and random, it can achieve just some remarkable things. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I mean, I don't think it's taking credit away from the very impressive and talented, skilled surgeons that were on her case. But if you had shown up in the worst negative mindset,
Yeah,
freaking out, I do believe that it would have
for
been
sure.
a different outcome.
For sure, for sure. And I think case in point of that was the first morning when we were meeting this team. So we just gotten to Miami the night before. 6 a.m. the next morning, the team had a chance to really look at her medical records, and we're a teeny tiny room. And I'm in there, and this, again, Olympian team of doctors walks in. They all happen to be men on this particular team, and all different ages, and they couldn't make eye contact with me. They were just trying to find a nice way to just tell me how bleak this looked. And what they later confided to me was that if this wasn't like the most complicated case that they looked at, it was one of the top 3 for sure. So they're there, and I just stopped them and basically said that same thing. I said, look, you are the best of the best. There is nowhere else in the world I would rather my daughter be right now. The medical field has never been as advanced as it is right now. This hospital is the best of the best. You have the best of the technology. I'm going to keep the best mindset here that I possibly can, and my daughter's going to be fine. We just need to figure out how to get her there. And you could see even their body, their posture went back. They looked at me. It was almost as if you could tangibly see that stress, that worry roll off, and they remembered who they were. And I think
I'm getting chills. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was incredibly powerful. Yeah.
So you were an entrepreneur before this happened.
Oh, yes.
What did you do beforehand?
So before this, I ran a boutique performing arts booking agency. That was primarily it. I was a serial entrepreneur. I'd done some things like when I was in my 20s, I designed a jewelry line that ended up in like Bloomingdale's and the Museum of Pop Art. I just loved being my own boss and working for myself and figuring things out and creating things. But while I was raising my kids, I had this booking agency in the performing arts as a result of my family having been in that. So part 2 of my story is miracle, miracle, miracle. And then insurance company says, great, you're out of here. So after 4 months, Sky was released from the hospital. Well, one detail is that in the performing arts, there's a 4-month window that is called the booking season, where virtually you book everything for the entire year. And after which you literally can't give things away because they can't get the volunteers to, be the ushers and all this, they don't have the money to promote it, et cetera, et cetera. So which months do you think I was in the ICU? My booking months. And I can tell you, if anyone's listening to this who is in sales, the best place to make cold calls is not from an ICU room. Definitely, I testimony to that. So second builder, invisible boulder, is Sky gets released. She's survived the unsurvivable. However, I have become her 24/7 caregiver, because surviving it at this point means she cannot be left alone. She cannot sit up. She cannot lift her arms more than a couple inches. She certainly cannot walk. She certainly cannot get herself to the restroom or do anything. She could barely swallow, barely talk. So, and I got back to my home office, with a whole bunch of bills and zero income. So it's like we had a second boulder, and it was like, holy smokes, how on earth am I going to be there 24/7 for her, including getting up every night at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. We put a baby monitor in there so that she could call me and I could come and get her to the toilet and take her back. So my sleep's even getting disrupted every night. And so, it was terrifying. I will not kid you, because I did not know where my next dollar was, how I was going to possibly afford any of this. Right. And, but this is where it got really interesting, because, I had opened up that part of myself that said, wait a minute, define impossible, define, normal even. I mean, you just saw your daughter is in the other room. She's living proof that it can be impossible or it can be I'm possible. There's a formula here. And so what I managed to do, it was a combination of the posts that I had written while she was in the hospital that were intended at first, two things. One, to really tell people around the world, because she'd been a world traveler, that she was going to make this, right? But it was also to manage their inner game, because I knew from what I knew about energy is that the more people around the world who saw her, like, there were no hospital pics and none of the like, oh, please pray for Skylar. None of it. I only wanted like victory energy around her. And so all the pictures that we posted, or that I ask other people, to honor us and not post anything but pictures of her at her most powerful, epic best, right? And so my posts were more like, if you want to support us, you go out there and you be the best version of yourself. You live your dreams, you connect with people, you be the one who says hello in the in the elevator or something like that, right? So as a result of that, what started as 100 people got shared and shared and shared. And so there were thousands of people. Now people were recognizing us, like in the airport, or, people coming up all the time. That's why my book even was published, was because some people came up and recognized me and said, when are you going to turn it into a book? And I said, it's on Facebook. Why do you? They're like, well, time is passing and we want to be able to share it and all that kind of stuff. So I was also getting asked to actually teach and coach other people who felt like they were stuck. They were bumping up against things. They were feeling like, I had such a great vision of where I thought I was going to be 10, 20, 30 years down the road. Now I'm waking up and I'm realizing either I'm not at all where I thought I would be. I don't even know who I am anymore, or I'm exactly where I thought I would be and I don't feel at all like I thought I would feel. I want to feel like I'm coming alive, right? And so I, as part of my other business, I really had to coach the performing arts performers in how to stand out, how to come alive, how to have that extra something, because everyone's incredibly talented. It's not enough to just be a great singer, a great performer. You have to be the biggest, boldest version of you in order to really make that impact. And so I started just gently doing some of that on the side, and people started asking me to speak, and I went, oh my God, I don't speak. No, I can't even introduce someone on stage. No, I cannot do that. And the more people ask me to do that, the more I really had to look inside myself and say, wait a minute, if you getting out there helps one person who needed to hear what you have in your story, then why on earth are you in this aspect of your life defining yourself based on the potential haters?
Mm-hmm.
They're not your people. They're not, you are not on this planet for them, at least not yet, not right now, right? And even you're gonna make them think, right? And so I decided, all right, I have to get over this fear. And meanwhile, 24/7 caregiver for my daughter, how to make it all work.
Yeah.
And ironically enough, COVID hit, which completely shut down the performing arts industry for 2 years, just as I was starting to get back on my feet in that industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew, okay, once again, we were going to have no money coming in, because if nobody's performing and the shows that were supposed to take place in 2020 are now being pushed to 2023 and nothing in between, well, maybe I can take a few more coaching clients. So, and maybe I can speak virtually and really get good at what I do. And before I knew it, I had coached hundreds of people in just a couple of years and really seen like epic changes for these people. And it's this simple, 3-part: identifying not only where you are, but who you are, recalibrating and rebooting accordingly, and creating that personal empowerment system for yourself, and then learning how to unleash it. And at the core of it is, your inner game, learning how to regulate your focus, your fear, your language, and realizing that transformation is as simple as making a different choice and believing that you can do it.
Isn't it wild how the universe will provide you the things that you need? You don't know that's what you
Oh,
need.
yes.
You don't know,
yes.
but you, even when the metaphorical boulder, came
Yes.
crumbling down,
Yes.
the universe provided you a means to make the
Yes.
money that capitalized on the
Yes.
strength that you had designed in
Yes.
those moments, which is wild.
Yes, it is wild, and it's interesting. I'm fascinated and glad that you brought that up, because one of the big epiphanies for me was when we were in that hospital. She's in the ICU. When they change shifts, they boot you out. So I wanted someplace that was quiet. So I went and sat in the chapel because I wanted to meditate a little bit and get focused. And what I realized all of a sudden, that there were a couple things, and maybe you have some of these, or your listeners might have some of these. There were a few circumstances in my life that intellectually I knew I should feel grateful for. I should forgive. I should be that better version of myself, that in actuality, I was like, I have no idea why that happened. Why did that happen? That so sucked. And I I'm supposed to forgive that, right? And what was so interesting to me as I sat in that little chapel and went, oh my gosh, it was like the effect of I compare it with, stepping out the front door of your house on a morning when there's like dew all over the place and there's the trees and the bushes. And you take two steps, and all of a sudden there's this magnificent spider web. Perfect. That one step backwards, you absolutely were not aware of, you did not see. And you know that as you go forward, it will disappear as well. It was that moment of going, oh my God, those things in my life, they were the things. If I had cried one less tear, if I had felt one itty bitty less angst over them, I would not have been the mother that Skylar needed in this moment, in this situation. And it was on that, the bench in that chapel that I was finally able to let go of some of my own boulders, per se, and forgive the things that had been unforgivable in my life, saying, oh my God. And what it helped me to do was to say, okay, so if those things that I hated living at the time have proven to be golden gifts, to your point, then who am I to judge what I'm experiencing right now? Let's not waste time freaking out over them. Let's start looking for the gold here. Right?
There's a book called The Surrender Experiment that talks about this, and it's fantastic. It's more on meditation, but this gentleman talks about his journey through meditation, that he wasn't even big into meditation, but he finds Zen Buddhism and starts to meditate, really to quiet the voice in his head, because he realizes one day that his voice is just constantly, it's like chatter going on.
Yes.
Like, man, how do I quiet that? Finds Zen Buddhism and has this just miraculous journey, this beautiful journey throughout his life. And he realizes that all these things start to happen, and when he stops fighting life, the universe, like things are coming his way, and he's like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And when he finally just says, like, yeah, okay, like I'll do it. More things, it's like abundantly start coming his way. And it's almost like the end state where you want to get.
Yes.
And if you try to take the direct path, you'll almost hit more opposition, more obstacles, more challenges. Where if you just take the journey that life is taking you on and the universe is putting in front of you, you might go around in a circle, but you're going to end up where you want, and it's going to be more fulfilling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It reminds me of the Rumi saying that what you seek is seeking you.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and it really, absolutely, my clients talk about it all the time, because it seems just so counterintuitive. Like, no, wait a minute, and in the very first session when I work with my clients, one of the things we talk about is not controlling the things that you can't control. And we waste so much energy trying to control the things out there so that we can maybe stimulate triggers that'll mean that effortlessly we can react in the way that we think we want to act, when in actuality, what we can control is our inner narrative, and it's the language, and it's learning, kind of to your point, to become the sovereign of our own mind, which means almost like virus protection, right? I mean, we would never not virus protect our technology. We would never not put passwords, right? And yet we feel that we just have to let everything in.
Everything comes in, and then it ends up affecting our life, affects our decisions. It affects how we view ourselves.
Exactly.
It affects so much, and it's like you can't even control that. You can control 4 things in your life: You can control what you think, control how
Yeah,
you feel, what you say, and what you do.
exactly.
And that's it.
Yeah,
And
right.
when you allow somebody and you try to control something else, you're effectively allowing that to control the only four things you can control, and you're losing control of those four simple things.
Exactly. Exactly. And for some reason, kind of to your point, um, I love how you say you can control what you think, because you really
You
can.
really can.
And you really can. And it's so interesting. I'm sure that you've talked with a lot of people who say, "Oh my God, it's so hard." It's
Yeah.
like, it's not hard. It's practiced.
Yes.
There's a big difference, you know. I
It's
mean,
it's it's your brain's a muscle the same way.
yes,
So it's like, well, okay, if you've never practiced trying to control your thoughts, and like I'm 38, so
yes,
in 38 years, I never tried to practice controlling my thoughts. That's like me never lifting a weight and then going to the
right,
gym and expecting me to lift like everyone that's been lifting for years. It's just not going to
exactly.
happen.
Right,
It's just something you have to practice and hone and like
right.
train yourself to do.
Right. And there's a big difference between needing to learn mastery and something being hard,
Mhm.
right? When you're excited about something, it's the Peter Pan theory. You know, when you love what you do, you're never working a day in your life, right?
Yeah.
So and I guess it's whether are you focusing on the difficulty, the struggle, in which case the struggle grows, or are you focusing on the possibility and in which the learning can really grow and the momentum can grow. So I love that. Absolutely. And if more people, I mean, if people took away nothing other than one thing from our conversation today, it's that learning to regulate your own thoughts, to direct. That's what I mean by being the sovereign of your own mind. Is It isn't hard. It just needs to be practiced with ruthless compassion
Yeah.
consistently, and you will get to the point where you do not show up and settle for being your own worst enemy. You show up with that, your mind being your superpower.
Yeah.
And that's an incredibly different experience, regardless of your circumstances. So, Skylar, almost 7 years later, still little tiny steps. We had, her first solo trips to the bathroom. She's able to walk on a walker with someone spotting her, these little tiny victories. But to me, it's, first of all, there's so many ways to find joy in your day, your moment.
Mhm.
And it's totally your assessment of whether it's successful or not successful. So that's on each of us individually.
Yeah.
And it's usually, what are we comparing it to? Right? What are we defining? Success would look like this, love would look like this, right? What are we defining it as? And and it's that 1% rule, right? And when we strive for 1% and then stack another 1% and then stack another 1% and really celebrate that along the way.
That's
Yeah.
honestly, I think that's the best way to do it. I think a lot of people don't realize that, like, to celebrate those small wins and to find true gratitude with those,
Yes.
because especially with entrepreneurs, we're
Yes.
so quick to just be work, 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 and not
Right.
stop and find reasons to look back and say, "Man, I've come this far," or "I've done these small things that have equaled this," and be very grateful for the progress that you've made.
Agreed. And
Be intentionally grateful.
yes, I think that's tremendous. And I think, for me and for some of my clients, one of the things that we've found, again, I find language to be huge,
Mhm.
because I find that language is kind of a symptom of how we view life, view ourselves, and what we view as truth.
Mhm.
And so therefore, each word comes with like a little invisible story attached to it, right? And so I think that, the word goal is one of those that has an invisible association, an invisible story attached to it. So the moment we set like a goal for ourselves, then we become like the little kids in the back seat. Like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? We wake up in the morning. Are we there? Oh, not yet. Okay. I'm not good enough. I don't have permission to really, yeah, that's good. That's good over there, but I'm not there yet. Right. As opposed to if we could, I believe personally that we have one goal and one goal only. And for me, that goal is to be taking my last breath, saying, oh my God, this was so freaking epic. I hope I get to do this again. Right. And then everything else along the way is an objective, because an objective also leaves you free to sail past that objective and surpass that objective. And it becomes it has a sense of fluidity versus a goal being like this grand, measurable destination. Now, I do think you definitely have to be able to measure things. You can still measure objectives, and you can measure by your minimum target, your main target, your stretch target. That word goal, I think, sometimes needs to be used very delicately, because if it tosses you in the back seat and causes you to wake up obsessively thinking that you cannot breathe, you cannot savor life until you hit that goal. And then, by the way, most of us tend to hit that goal, celebrate for like 15 minutes, and then go, okay, so what's next? That goal. And then once again, we're kind of holding our breath until we get to that next destination point.
Yeah. I love that perspective shift, that looking at it from a different lens, objective versus goal. I think that's a powerful way to revamp the mind in order to make sure that you're not, I mean, with goal setting, you're right. People can become obsessed, right? And also that obsession can lead to negative thoughts.
Yeah.
That is just like, either A, you can become reclusive and just focus on, and honestly, when you look at comprehensive fitness, and you look at like filling up buckets, like I see it as filling up buckets on a daily basis. So
yes,
your physical, your mental, your spiritual, your professional, your social. Okay. And so if you fill everything into your professional, because that's your goal, is your professional goal, that's like me going in my car and just putting in gas and then just pressing down on the gas pedal and never getting the oils changed, never getting the tires rotated, never getting tune-ups, never getting the car checked out, nothing. That's it. Yeah. Eventually my car is going to explode. Like it's going to happen. And so you're doing the same thing as to your body and your mind and your spirit when you're just focused on that one thing, and you're not feeding other buckets. You're not trying to fill your physical, your mental, your spiritual, your social, and you're not filling these other buckets to make you to where you're fulfilled. It prevents burnout.
Agreed. Agreed. And I think what I found with objective is that it allows more agility, I think, and it allows us to, without bumping up against the ego quite as harshly, to say, okay, what's working, what's not working, what do we need to do differently? If it's a goal, it almost becomes part of our identity, because it usually isn't the goal, it's my goal, right? So it's part of now who we're staking our claim to. This is my enoughness is based on this goal, right? My sense of worth and self-value. Whereas if it's an objective, it allows us to say, okay, so let's take a look at this. Does the objective need to be shifted slightly or modified? And it just, again, it's more fluid, I think, more agile. And I think we need, again, I think we need agility. We need that fluidity. What is moving is life-giving. What is stagnant tends to expire and get absorbed, So I think language is just so critical, so critical. Last thing I'll I'll play with you with is one thing along those lines that have been really big is I don't know, you probably hear this a lot too, but most people who come to me say, okay, well, my biggest challenge is blah, 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 right? Whatever it is. It's like I'm feeling stuck, or I don't know what my next big thing is. I'm lacking passion, I'm lacking perfect, blah, 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 whatever it is. My biggest challenge is, and it's this stake in the ground, right? And so I often ask them, what do you think is the most powerful word in that sentence? And of course, it's a trick question, right? But the majority of people will land on challenge. And true to what we're talking about, challenge is a really intense word, right? When you say that in that context, there's some context where challenging is great. But when they're talking in that context, they're not going, yay, I have this challenge, I can't get started. There's no joy in that. It's heavy. It's impossible. It's how come they have figured this out and I haven't? It's this heavy, heavy being surrounded by invisible stories of impossibility.
Mhm.
But then they don't stop there. They modify it with biggest. Well, of course, can you have something that's the big S if you only have one? No, it's a modifier. So subconsciously, you're telling yourself, girl, you've got challenges. This just happens to be the biggest, right? And then if I say, not the biggest challenge, I say my biggest challenge, all of a sudden, it's, Meredith with two eyes, a nose, a mouth, and hi, I have this challenge, bear with me, right? And so it becomes very big. But the biggest word, the most powerful word in that sentence that I found is so powerful because it goes completely under the radar. We don't pay attention to it. And it's, of course, the word is, because that's the present tense. Because if you notice, we only make present tense statements that we believe to be based on fact, truth with all capital letters. So it's a declaration that becomes like the programming code. So it tends to be the foundation from which everything else that we do launches from. So if we're launching from a place of my biggest challenge is, that's the programming code that we've given to our mind. So of course, going back to the questions, what can my mind believe? If you are advocating, and I have nothing against, standing in front of the mirror and saying, I am blah, 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 great. However, for most people, their mind is going to go, okay, money magnet, have you checked your bank account recently? Your mind's going to go, right? However, and so the third question, if you remember, is what might I be assuming that is not necessarily true? And in this case, yes, it is true that you have this big challenge. Absolutely. I get it. The assumption, though, is that that's the only version of truth. Isn't it also true to say my biggest focus now is figuring out what it is that I want to do next, right? Or my biggest commitment right now is figuring out what I'm going to do next, right? So imagine if we were to even say, if we've got teams, well, our big challenge right now is pulling up our numbers versus, hey, we are committed this quarter. We are committed to pulling up those, finding out what it's going to take to get our numbers up, right? It feels more in the realm of possibility than, oh no, we got this challenge here. It's looking kind of grim. So I feel like the words that we feed ourselves and the people around us are just so huge. And that's an integral part of how we begin that process of controlling what we think. It begins with, what are our present tense statements? And the words that are like challenge and struggle, can we flip them to something that our mind can believe that's more of an opportunity? Something
Yes.
I'm excited about.
That's so good.
Thank you.
I love that. That's so good.
Thank you.
Meredith, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story. That is very powerful, and it was very vulnerable also. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Well,
If anybody wants to find out more about your coaching, or they want to reach out to
mhm.
you just to like learn more about you, what's the best medium to follow you on?
Best medium is LinkedIn.
Okay.
Meridith Alexander, yes. And if you want to find out more about my coaching, it's gritmindsetacademy.com.
Okay.
And you'll even see that I, have the opportunity. If you want to get onto a, 20-minute strategy call and tell me what's going on and have me potentially point you in a more epic direction, I'm happy to do that too. But yeah, LinkedIn is great. I am on Facebook. I do have a YouTube channel.
Okay.
So you can follow me there as well. And of course, I have the book.
And all this will be in the show notes as well. So
Perfect. Well, Greg, it's been amazing
yeah,
being here. Thank you so much for having me be part of your incredible show.
yeah, it was my pleasure. The last question I ask all of my guests: you have an opportunity to speak, learn from, break bread with, and spend some time with 3 individuals, anyone in history, alive or passed
Oh,
away. Who would those 3 people be?
wow. Interesting. Oh gosh, there's so many incredible, epic people. One person currently who comes to mind, just because I love her energy, would actually be Lisa Nichols. I mean, she has such an incredible story of really rising up from incredible circumstances, not unlike Oprah for sure. Um, um, but otherwise, who I think would be really fascinating. Um, I continue to learn more. I don't know a lot about him, but his perspective was really interesting. Howard Thurman, who said, one of his quotes is something like, don't ask what the world needs. Find what makes you come alive, because what the world needs right now is people who have come alive.
Mhm.
And I find that incredibly insightful. And I think the other person that I would really enjoy, I mean, again, there's so many. I would say it would probably have to be Gandhi. I think he was amazing. He was pushing up against so many just obstacles, and just the way that he processed that
Yeah.
Was so revolutionary for the time, that I think we have a lot to learn from that. So
Those are all 3 great choices, and they're all unique. I've never had them.
yeah.
So that is great. I love it. So for all of you watching, for all the audience that are watching or listening, I need your help. We grow this podcast by word of mouth. That's why there's no ads. And we try to provide value and hopefully change your perspective, teach you something, give you a new outlook, or a new way to see your situation, or to help you in your life. And if it did provide value, I ask you a favor. I ask you to go ahead and share this content with somebody else that could also provide value to. Take a couple of seconds, a minute max, to give us a rate, a review, a subscribe, and also share this content with somebody else. It would mean the world to both myself and Meridith, because we can spread her message as well.
Woo-hoo.
This has been the Be the Difference podcast. I'm your host, Greg Birch. Until next time.